I hate the phrase that the dose makes the poison because while it may be true logically and chemically and scientifically or whatever, the problem is that it gives people an excuse to do things in moderation which they could probably be better off without even doing at all. You've heard of the whole 1 hour of video games per day is okay, and 1 bar of chocolate or packet of sweets per week is not going to be so bad for you. But the problem is that this stuff still has control over you if you try to keep it in moderation. Even if you do 1 hour video games per day, all it shows is that this stuff still has power over you and you still need it to like function as a normal human being. And that's not what we want. We want you to be able to control the desires inside of your mind and to be able to resist things like sugar and video games. Because while, yeah, 1 hour video games per day or like 1 bar of sweets or 1 packet of sweets per week or whatever, while it may not seem so bad for you, the problem is that it just shows that you're still addicted to the stuff inside and you still cannot live without it. But the problem is that this whole 1 hour of video games per day or 1 packet of sweets per week, this is enough for poison. 1 hour of video games per day ends up being 365 hours of your life gone over the course of a year, and that may be equal to around like 15 whole days just wasted that you probably didn't even see coming. You probably couldn't even comprehend when you sort of made the excuse that 1 hour per day would be fine, that would end up taking off 15 whole days of your year. And that seems quite interesting when you think about it. And that is the whole compounding effect, taking action. And 1 packet of sweets per week may cause enough insulin spikes for you to develop insulin resistance, even if that is the only sort of junk food and sugary snack that you eat over the course of that entire year. It may cause enough insulin spikes for you to develop an insulin resistance, and that can lead to things like diabetes, and like after that you can get things like metabolic syndrome and obesity and a hell of a lot of other not fun stuff. And plus, things like sugar and video games are incredibly addictive and therefore harder to moderate. If you were previously quite addicted to video games, like you used to spend 12 hours a day on them, or used to eat 400 grams of sugar every single day, it's going to be very hard to moderate this sort of stuff when you were so addicted maybe just a month or so before. Because the problem is, when it comes to moderation, it might mean that you end up falling back into the previous addiction. The 1 hour per video games every single day may turn into 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours after you just say things like one more game, I'll get off the game when I win or when I lose, or all that sort of stuff. And you may end up coping with sugar and just eat a few more sugary snacks and chocolate bars and crisps or whatever than you normally would on your sort of moderation sugary diet or whatever. And that's the problem with sort of the dose makes the poison, because it means that while this stuff, it may not actually be so bad in moderation, it means people who are previously addicted to this stuff will end up just falling back in to the previous addictions they had before because they never completely got over it. And this phrase, the dose makes the poison, doesn't just have to apply to generic self-improvement like video games and sugar. It can apply to actual poison that could be affecting your self-improvement journey as we speak. The reason that I started hating this phrase to begin with was because I saw a YouTube video that was on something about pesticides, and it said that the amount of pesticides and herbicides and all that sort of stuff that is sprayed on fruit and veg, when it ends up being in shops and we end up eating them, the amount of pesticides on these fruit and veg isn't enough to actually harm our health. And the problem is, while that may be true, and while the sort of phrase, oh, the dose makes the poison, may be correct, you still deserve to know that there are poisonous chemicals on your fruit and veg when you actually go to eat them. It's not fair on you as a person to be sort of blind and ignorant to the kind of stuff that they could be putting on your food. And then it's up to you to sort of solve these issues yourself. Because while we should probably take responsibility and take action for this kind of stuff, there is no taking action if you don't even know what you're supposed to be taking action on. And that's why I'm wanting to sort of educate people on these topics of the fact that, oh yeah, there's stuff in our tap water that probably shouldn't be there and that you probably don't even know about. And pesticides are sprayed on your food that could be affecting your hormones. Even if it's in a slightly minuscule way, it's still going to have an effect on your body because this stuff isn't supposed to be there. Even if like an actual poison was in a smaller dose than it was like it needed to be lethal, it's still going to make you ill and it's still going to have an effect on the body. And while it may not be as bad in such small quantities, it's still going to have an effect on the body that may just not be noticeable because your body has spent a bit of energy trying to actually adapt to this new pesticide or this new poison that's been put in your body through companies that just wanted an easy way to make their products a bit like cheaper to manufacture so they could end up making more profit per unit cost. And the problem is that pesticides on fruit and veg and chemicals in tap water and plastics, it's all going to vary from thing to thing. There's going to be no two similar amount of pesticides on each and every apple, and there may be one apple that you eat that has quite a high concentration of pesticides that ends up being quite worrying, and one that's going to have relatively none at all and that doesn't have any impact on your health whatsoever. And so the phrase "the dose makes the poison" is just silly because the dose is going to vary every single time that you eat fruit and veg, and it's essentially just you playing Russian roulette. And while I'm not saying to stop eating fruit and vegetables, the positives probably outweigh the negatives in this situation, but we should probably aspire to be getting rid of every single negative that there possibly could be from eating such a healthy thing like fruits and vegetables. For instance, the example of things like DDT and pesticides being on our fruit and veg, which does have impact on our hormones and on our bodily functions and systems in the long term. And so, yeah, personally, I just disagree with the whole "the dose makes the poison" thing, because it just means that companies can get away with doing things and not really having to tell you that, oh yeah, they are putting pesticides with harmful chemicals on the fruit and veg that you end up eating in the end. And while it is true that we probably should take more responsibility for our health and be able to choose things like organic fruits that haven't been sprayed with pesticides whatsoever, it's best that you actually know that there are pesticides and herbicides on your fruit and veg and that there are too many heavy metal lead ions inside of your tap water. In certain situations, it's best that you are aware of this kind of stuff rather than companies and governments getting away with it and not having to tell you, which could end up leading to bad things happening to them or whatever, which obviously they're not going to want. So with that, I hope you found value out this video, and I hope you now understand that you just need to know about things like chemicals in tap water, like pesticides, and you shouldn't just sort of brush it off and think that the dose makes the poison, as well as in situations of like generic self-improvement with things like sugar and video games and all that other stuff. So yeah, I also recommend subscribing because I love this community of young tribal people who are willing to improve themselves so much more than they already have, and good luck.